we heard how independent politician Martin Bell won't be standing against Hazel Blears at the next election, and he's here with me to explain why. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
A lot of people in Salford were rather hoping that you would. Why have you decided not to?
I don't think so. I think Salford people know they need a Salford candidate, and I've always been in favour. We live in the most extraordinary times politically. I've been in the favour of what I call the local hero option, where one of these MPs appears to have claimed expenses that weren't strictly claimable, that I think they're much better challenged by a local person. And the example I give is Dr. Richard Taylor, the Kidderminster MP, who ousted an unpopular Labour MP in 2001, 17,000 vote majority, because he just got the people on his side and he was well known.
That was about a hospital that he didn't want closing.
And they also felt abandoned by the MP who had started off supporting the campaign and then dropped away. And he was re-elected 4 years later, so he was doing something right.
What about the issue then of, some have described it as hounding Ms Blears out of office? Is the best way for the electorate to display their displeasure at the ballot box when the election comes, rather than pressing for her to go now?
I think that actions have consequences, and we are now entering a period of consequences for lots and lots of MPs all over the country. Many of those who've claimed what they shouldn't have stood down or been forced to stand down. She hasn't, and it's up to her. I'm not judging the case, but obviously she has something to answer. If you pay back £13,000, well, why did you pay it back? Should you have claimed it in the first place? There are lots of cases similar around the country, but I think and she's not being hounded, she's not being victimised, but simply because she is such a prominent politician, former party chairman, Secretary of State, obviously the stakes are raised.
Yes.
And I think she could get rid of the whole thing just by saying, I done wrong, I made a mistake, I was distracted, I won't do it again. I mean, there are ways of playing this.
So apologise rather than stand down will be the way to play it.
I think if she apologised sincerely, then...
Is it a bit too late for that now?
Well, then the question arises, why didn't you apologise earlier? But fundamentally, it is for Salford people. The only reason I was here last night was because they asked me, and I could advise them if they wanted to run an independent campaign. It's not the easiest thing in the world. I told them the opportunities and the pitfalls.
And those are what? I mean, there is a great strength of feeling against Ms Blears. Although I have to say, last night, maybe 100 people turned up. The constituency is probably about 75,000 people. So a lot of people weren't there. Maybe the feeling is passionate in the few, but not in the majority. It
is very unusual to get even 100 people to a political meeting these days. All the anecdotal evidence I get is there's real concern out there on the doorsteps. So there are questions to be answered. And between now and election day, the Hazel Must Go campaign either decides to field a candidate or it doesn't. My own feeling is that it's going to be really tough because you're up against the machine. You're up against party politics. You're up against party political broadcasts and the natural loyalty of party voters. But if they've found the right candidate, and I don't know if the person is out there, then miracles can happen. But I was telling them of all the problems they're going to face. Money, attention, you need foot soldiers on the street, you've got to compete on equal terms with the party candidate.
It's all very well having the passion and a single issue, but it takes more than that to get somebody into Westminster then.
It takes organisation. And when you get there, you can be a single-issue candidate, but you're a multi-issue MP, because you vote on everything. And therefore, the electors have a right to know where you stand.
Your thoughts on education and health and
absolutely.
Other
I
issues.
think I can say that in 1997 I put out one of the most boring manifestos ever, but it didn't mislead anybody. But I concentrated on the main issue, which had to do with Neil Hamilton.
When you were an MP, did you claim expenses?
Yes, of course, because I lived in a little house in Great Budworth, which cost me £7,000 a year, and I charged £7,000 a year.
And were you aware of flaws in the system that have caused Ms Blears all these problems?
Only to the extent that I was invited to sign 2 cheques to myself every month, one for the accommodation and one for the mileage, and I could have put any figure I wanted, but of course I didn't. But I didn't know they could charge £400 a month for food. You and I, everybody watching this, we pay our grocery bills out of taxed earned income. I know they could charge thousands of pounds in
You were
petty
unaware?
cash.
Because yeah. I understand it, that the fees office let it be known that, look, ladies and gentlemen who have been elected, this is just a top-up for your salary, so just claim what you can.
That's a good point, and I think the fees office was complicit in this. But I think this is all fairly recent. I think the worst abuses happened after 2001. In fact, they happened after Elizabeth Filkin lost her job as Commissioner for Standards, because that sent a signal, fill your boots, boys. But there are plenty of MPs who have impeccable records. They're not all crooks. But I think something like half of them have been required to pay back money that strictly wasn't theirs. That's a lot.
I just wonder why the issue only came to prominence and so many people were saying that the system is flawed after the event rather than beforehand. If you saw the system was flawed at the time, why didn't you say something?
Because it wasn't that flawed and I didn't know how flawed it was. I think this really only came to light through a Freedom of Information. When the Freedom of Information Act came in, campaigners started asking for the details. And the House of Commons fought it every inch of the way, including attempts to get MPs' expenses exempted from it. But it all came out from between March and May and beyond this year. And the House of Commons' own attempts to put it in the, I don't know if you remember all the front pages with the big black rectangles.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you say. I mean, they did it. This is not the result of a campaign by people like me or anybody else. They did this to themselves. And I find people are really upset out there, right across the country.
Yeah. OK. Well, let's move on to your career post-Westminster. You've been involved with the Minds Advisory Group, which you described to me a moment ago as the least-known charity in Manchester. Tell me about the Minds Advisory Group, Mr. Bell.
This has absolutely nothing to do with my political activities. I put a firewall between
Absolutely, very clear.
I've been around the war zone since 1967, which is actually about 18 war zones. And the longer I stayed at it, and I still go there for UNICEF, the more I became aware that one of the great curses of our time is unexploded ordnance, bombs that are dropped but don't explode, landmines sown in the ground. And this charity, the Minds Advisory Group, is based in Manchester for 12 years. It's Manchester's best kept secret. They've got 2,600 people working around the world in 17 countries, and nobody knows about them. So tonight they're doing a little bit of publicity. We're inviting the various mayors and dignitaries along and saying, look, guys, this is something else for Manchester to be really proud of. So I'll give a very short, non-political speech. And I honestly don't know anywhere in the world a better cause. It actually saves lives every day.
What do they do directly? Do they remove the ordnance? Do they deal with the people who are victims of the stuff when it goes off?
They do everything. Their primary task is landmine removal, and there's a risk. They teach people how to do it. This charity was founded by 2 ex-British soldiers. They run programs in all these countries. And most vitally, they do mine awareness courses for the children. There are 20 countries in the world where the first subject a kid has to learn is landmine awareness, from the time they can walk. And if you go anywhere from Cambodia to ex-Yugoslavia to Nicaragua, if the kids get that wrong, they get everything wrong. And sometimes I feel that we in our safe and relatively comfortable environments, we've got no idea what's going on out there. We've got no idea at all. One of the great things that MAG does is it does this good, and from today we're going to try to raise its profile and people's awareness of it.
And are you looking for contributions, presumably?
They are. I don't look for contributions because they don't trust me with money, you know me, but they are. It's expensive. And a lot of their programs are funded from the United States, where MAG has an organisation, and if the funding falls off, mine teams are demobilised, and then landmines stay in the ground, and lives are further endangered.
So, well, more power to your elbow with that, and thanks very much indeed for your thoughts on Hazel Blears. A great pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, sir.
Martin, thanks for your time.